Hey guys, welcome back to Scanline City. Today I have for you the Multi-Arcade Systems arcade sticks, also known as M.A.S. Now, regardless of your opinion on American arcade style parts, this brand is legendary. Fight! Now, the M.A.S. sticks are a beast to cover because they're pretty controversial in terms of whether or not you like them. And some people think they're good, some people think they're bad. But in my opinion, it's more about whether or not you like American arcade style parts. The bat top, those hap style buttons that are harder to press. But before we get too far into this thing, I think it's important to give you a bit of a history lesson because it's vital to understanding the importance of this brand's legacy. They were a pioneer in the fighting game community, specifically with fight sticks. Back in the early to mid 90s, arcades were huge, as you probably know. And with the release of Street Fighter II, the competitive scene just exploded. And if you wanted to play the latest fighting game, particularly being competitive in that fighting game, you had to go to the arcade. Now, you have to understand that Multi-Arcade Systems, M.A.S, was born out of a very key turning point in video game history. It was when the consoles started to catch up to the arcades and games started to become arcade perfect. And when that happened, a lot of tournaments were starting to use consoles for those competitive tournaments. That meant that those top players who were used to playing on only arcades were then forced to use either a controller or a very different style Japanese arcade stick. And for a lot of players, that was really tough. That was a big transition. The M.A.S sticks were able to bridge the gap between console and arcade and allowed a lot of players to feel comfortable with an arcade stick in their lap. And at the time, the M.A.S stick was the only one that did that. And a lot of the legends that we know came out of that time. John Choi, Alex Valle, both of which used the M.A.S sticks in competitive play down the road. John Choi actually still uses it to this day, which is, man, that's awesome. And the coolest part was that it was just one guy making all of these sticks. In fact, he lives here in California. And at the time, it was like a strange myth as to where these came from. Somebody would show up with a M.A.S stick and people would be like, what is that? Multi-Arcade Systems, where did you get that? I don't know, like you just pay this guy cash, you come to his house and then he gives you a stick and you ask him, you tell him what you want. Okay. And it was like, well, nobody knew where these were coming from because it wasn't like a brand did this big announcement saying, hey, we're releasing all these arcade sticks. They were just showing up one by one and it just started growing and growing and growing. So M.A.S was pretty successful, but sadly, professional players started moving on to Japanese style sticks and leaving the American arcade sticks behind. And consequently, M.A.S started to just fade away. And that's kind of sad because it was a legend. And for me, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, there's nothing like that time in the American arcades. You know, you're begging your dad for quarters, you're running into that pizza parlor arcade, putting it into the Neo Geo, playing Samurai Showdown, your friends are around you, you're slamming that bat top around, smashing those hat buttons. I mean, that was an amazing time. And honestly, even if you don't even play as well, it's just such a nostalgia trip to play on these that takes you back. It's like driving a classic car. It may not go as fast, but it's still awesome and deserves preservation. So let's talk about the sticks themselves. They came out from multiple systems, hence the name Multi-Arcade Systems. And those were systems such as the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, Sega Saturn, PlayStation, Neo Geo, Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, even the freaking 3DO. He even had some that were dual modded, where it was a PlayStation 2 Dreamcast stick, which makes a lot of sense for the time because there were so many competitive fighters for both of those consoles, but that was just unheard of at the time. I mean, dual modding was just like not a thing. Now these sticks are made of heavy MDF wood, like it was pulled directly off of an arcade system. It has that art laminate, and it even has that rubber molding that you're used to seeing on basically any arcade cab, and I think that's really cool. M.A.S sticks typically came in two sizes. You had the regular full size, and then you had the mini. And most people, including myself, prefer the standard size. It just feels a little bit more accurate to playing on the real arcade board. That's not to say that the minis are bad, it's just smaller. The sticks come standard with HAP style buttons and joystick. Now HAP isn't what they used to be, but back then they were pretty much reference quality. As for the buttons, you either got the classic concave or you get the convex buttons. If you want that old school, hard to press, slamming the buttons feel, I'd go with the concave. If you want a little bit more of a modern feel, I'd go with the convex. Either way you go, pretty rad, and they fit the M.A.S perfectly. Now the button layouts were typically that Street Fighter II straight across design, which I really like. I mean, that's absolutely perfect for the time. It's Street Fighter II that was like the big push for these guys. Some of them had 8 buttons, some of them had 6 buttons, and for something like the Neo Geo, you only had 4. It was always really accurate for the consoles or the arcade that it was pushing. I always really like the art style of all the M.A.S sticks. They're never anything too crazy or flashy. They just feel like they came right off of an arcade cab. And that's what I like about them. They're true to the intention of the M.A.S sticks. Now, just to show you how personal of a project these M.A.S sticks were to the creator, you need to look no further than the graphic of a dragon with the year 2000 underneath it, and the graphic of a Pegasus with the year 1990. And those represent his 2 kids. It's the Chinese zodiac sign for his 2 kids. Now, I've been collecting M.A.S sticks and obviously mini sticks for a long time. And along that journey, I met 2 guys that are really cool. One being Royal Flush, who a lot of you know. He's a fantastic modder. And also Daniel Borelli, who's like a M.A.S guru. And after talking with them for a bit, they offered to restore 2 M.A.S sticks for me, like some busted up old ones that were like at the end of their lifespan, and see if they could bring them back to glory, like a classic car who just got a new paint job and a new engine. So let's see what they can do. These guys did an amazing job. I mean, for starters, the art is just so beautiful. It looks like it's right off of a Street Fighter II cab. You have new convex buttons. You have the new molding. The molding looks fantastic. It's nice and bright. You have extra buttons on the front because these are dual modded. It has a universal fight board, dual modded with a retro board, so you can play on pretty much any console you want. And the coolest part is they both have Rico Perfect 360 joysticks directly from Daniel's personal collection. And these are a legendary arcade part. These are actually motorized optical joysticks. And basically what that means is, hear that? Nothing, no clicks, because it's an optical joystick. So it's completely silent, really smooth, because you're not hitting any clicks. And for a lot of Marvel 2 players, they swear by these. In fact, I'm pretty sure these were used in the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabs. So all around, man, these guys did an amazing job. So hats off to Daniel and to Royal Flush. Those guys are amazing. And thank you for preserving and shining light onto M.A.S in the best way possible, because they really do deserve it. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, M.A.S sticks are not gonna be for everyone, especially if you're just a hardcore Japanese ball top player only, or if you didn't grow up in the American arcades. But you cannot deny the historic significance and impact on the fighting game community that multi-arcade systems M.A.S had. And for anybody who grew up in the American arcades, loved the Neo Geo, Street Fighter II cabs, whatever, and you're looking to bring back that special arcade experience in an arcade stick, look no further than the M.A.S. Now I want to give a big thank you to Arcade Shock for this episode. They provided me with a lot of the information and connections, and actually connected me with Alex Valle and also John Choi, who gave me also a lot of great information in the backstory of M.A.S. Really love those guys. Fantastic people to work with. And thank you everyone for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned a little about M.A.S. that you didn't know previously. I'll see you guys on the next one. Multi-arcade systems. Where did that come from? Oh, well, again. This is my cat, Gus. He also likes M.A.S. sticks.